إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله أدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة ونصح للأمة فكشف الله به الغمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده حتى أتاه اليقين فاللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who have believed, have the taqwa of Allah as is rightfully due to Allah, and do not die except as Muslims. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in His book, يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. He says upon the tongue of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the patriarch of all of the prophets, that he was making a sequence of dua, of prayers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and during this sequence he was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save him from the shame on the Day of Judgment. He says, وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ. He says, do not shame me, do not embarrass me on the day when everybody will be resurrected in front of Allah. And then he describes that day. That day, no wealth will benefit any individual, nor will their children, except the only thing that can benefit the person. Meaning it's as if he's saying nothing can benefit. And then he's mentioning these two as examples because many people have a lot of wealth thinking that it can benefit them in some way. Or they have a lot of children thinking that they can benefit them in some way. He says none of this can benefit. And nothing else can really benefit except illa. And he makes an exception. Man atallaha biqalbin salim. The one except for the one who comes to Allah, who when he stands in front of Allah, he presents forth a healthy heart. He presents to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a healthy heart. We are not talking about the heart in a physical healthiness part, meaning the type where you go to a doctor and he says, yeah, you have a healthy heart, you know, and all these things, a cardiologist and so forth. We are talking about a heart from the spiritual point of view. And today, inshallah ta'ala, the talk will be a discussion on examples of people who had healthy hearts and people who did not have healthy hearts, and how we can get a healthier heart. This khutbah is not to imply that we have diseased hearts, or that I am trying to put the blame on people and tell everybody that everybody is diseased. Wal-'iyadhu billah. May Allah protect us. The fact that all of us here, the assumption is we believe in Allah, we believe in His oneness, we accept His Messenger ﷺ, and we follow His Messenger. This is proof that there is a lot of good in the hearts already. But the idea is to keep it healthy. Because even like our bodies, we have to keep them healthy. If we abuse them and we do not exercise them properly, they will decay, they will deteriorate. Similarly is this heart that we have. Allah Azza wa Jal, He has given us this heart to take care of. And so the idea today, inshallah ta'ala, is to explore some of these ideas regarding this healthy heart from an Islamic point of view. Our Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith that إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً لَوْ صَلُحَتْ صَلُحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ وَلَوْ فَسُدَتْ فَسُدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. He says, he says there is a piece of flesh inside of the body that if it is good, the rest of the body is good. And if it is bad, the rest of the body is bad. And then he says at the end, أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبِ, that indeed it is nothing other than the heart. That if a person's heart is good, everything else will be fine. And if the person's heart is bad, everything else, of course, will be accordingly. Nowadays, when we see that there's animosity between people, when we see that there's hatred, there is distrust, there is envy, there is people mocking each other, people having arrogance over one another, thinking that they are better than someone else. All of this is nothing but a result of perhaps a heart not being as healthy as it should be. And that the opposite is true. That when a person loves another person for the sake of Allah and only for the sake of Allah, not for anything else, not because of a common language or a common culture or a common food or a common benefit or a common business, whatever. Because they are simply Muslims, this is a sign of course, a healthy heart. And this is why many of the people, many of the predecessors, wallahi, they have story after story of how their whole concern, everything that they did was to gain a healthy heart. In fact, our situation now as Muslims, when you look around the world, what is going on to the Muslims around the world, wherever they may be, in whatever country you name it, you can almost pick a country and you can find problems that are happening to the Muslims there. One of the reasons, I'm not saying the only reason, one of the reasons why the situation is such is because of a diseased heart. Is because actually us as Muslims, our hearts are not as healthy as it should be. What is the proof for this? The Prophet ﷺ says in the correct hadith, and all of us know this hadith, we have mentioned it before, and many people mention it also, where the Prophet ﷺ says, تَتَدَاعَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْأُمَمْ كَمَا تَتَدَاعَةُ الْأَكَلَةُ عَلَى قَصْعَتِهَا. He says that the nations will gather upon you just like the animals will gather upon its prey, or like the animals will gather around a plate of food. All of them are gathering to get a piece. And then one of the Sahaba said, أَوَ مِنْ قِلَّةٍ نَحْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Is it because we are so few that day that everybody's taking advantage of us? He says, لَا بَلْ أَنْتُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ كَثِيرٌ وَلَكِنَّكُمْ غُثَاء كَغُثَاءِ السَّيْلِ. He says, on that day you are a lot, but your numbers are just like the foam upon the sea. You're just like water. Wherever the water takes you, you're going to go. You're not solidified. You're not standing firm for your values. You go wherever the breeze, the culture is taking you this way, I'm going to go this way. The fashion is taking you this way, I'm going to go this way. And he says, وَقَذَفَ فِي قُلُوبِكُمُ الْوَهْنِ. And that Allah Azza wa Jal, so the reason is because you're not solidified, you're like this foam upon the ocean, and because Allah has put in your hearts al-wahn. Excuse me. So they asked, قِيلَ وَمَا الْوَهْنُ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. What is wahn, O Messenger of Allah? What is this wahn that you're talking about that is now in our hearts? What did he say? حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. It is the love of dunya and the hatred of death. And we're not talking about the natural hatred of death, because all of us do not like to face death. He's not talking about the natural hate of death. He's talking about that we are not ready for death. That when death comes to us, we are not ready for it. We are not getting ready for it right now as we speak. And of course, the first part is the love of the dunya, the attachment to the dunya so much that this is the only thing we live for. Even we say we are Muslims, we believe in the hereafter, but the only thing that my actions are proving is that I am a believer in the dunya and I'm not a believer in the hereafter. Because everything that I do is geared towards my dunya and it is not geared towards my hereafter. I'm doing nothing to build my hereafter, and I have built my dunya to where it's amazing and beautiful and well built up. But my hereafter is of course crumbling around me and I do not realize this. A healthy heart does the opposite. It understands that this dunya is merely a test, and that I should only use from it and take from it that which I need to get to my next destination. If I fail to realize that I have a next destination, then I am of course fooling myself. Along these lines, there was one of the tabi'een, his name is Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Some of you may have heard of him. He's a great scholar of those early generations of Muslims. And he was a scholar, by the way. And when they were called out to go and fight in the battlefield, he went. And he's there with his friend. And they said that when the two armies were lined up, one of the enemies came forth. And of course, before the battle, they used to have these sparring battles on the battlefield before the battle would actually take place. So this man comes out from the enemy and he asks for a challenger. One of the Muslims goes and the Muslim guy is killed. He asks for another challenger. Another Muslim goes and he is killed. 2. A third one goes and dies. A fourth one goes and dies. Up until 6 Muslims have died. And upon seeing this, Abdullah ibn Mubarak He's not a fighter, he's not a warrior, he's a scholar. He tells the friend next to him, he says, I'm going to have to do something to stop this. And this is not only an embarrassment, but this guy is actually killing our brothers in front of us while we are doing nothing. So he tells his friend that was sitting next to him, and his friend is the one who's narrating the story. And he says, Abdullah Mubarak goes on to now give me his wasiyah. He's giving me his will. He says, if I die, this is what you're going to do with this. This is how you're going to take care of this. I want you to take care of my children. Promise me you're going to take care of my wife, etc. He's telling him all these things. If I do not come back. He said, I'm giving you this as an amana, as a trust. He says, okay. And then he says he goes, he covers his face. Abdullah Mubarak covers his face. And he goes to this man. And of course he's making a lot of dhikr, a lot of Qur'an. And he's able to defeat him. And then he says, I want a challenger. And so a challenger from the non-Muslim army comes, and he's able to defeat him. And he's able to defeat another one, until there are 6. And then he shouts out to them, 6 for 6. Is there anyone else who wants to come and challenge me now? We are even. Who wants to come and challenge me? And nobody came. And so Abdullah Mubarak, he left that place, and then of course the battle commenced. When he comes back to his friend is the only one who knows who it is, who is able to defeat. Everybody's asking, everybody's clamoring. We want to know who was the one who was able to do this. Abdullah Mubarak told his friend, Wallahi, he took an oath upon him. He says, if you expose me, I neither know you nor do you know me. I will never talk to you again. You will have nothing to do if you expose my secret when I am still alive. And so the friend kept his promise. He said, okay, I will not expose your promise. This story, we are saying it because it is proof of how people, when they did something, whatever it was, we're not saying that you have to go to the battlefield. We're saying whatever it is that you do, it has to be done for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of boasting, for the sake that people can say, oh look, this guy, mashallah, he did what he did, and all of these things. He was able to defeat those people not because he was a warrior. We said before, he is not a warrior. He was able to defeat them first and foremost through Allah Azza wa Jal alone. But he was only able to get Allah's help because he had a healthy heart, and he was doing it purely for the sake of Allah and not for anything else. The sincerity was there, the healthy heart was there, and therefore victory was also there. This is the point that I want to make, inshallah ta'ala, today. That when the healthy heart is there, when it's doing things purely for the sake of Allah, everything else will fall into place. Now there might be a misconception that is, as long as I have a healthy heart, my actions are of little consequence. And this is actually incorrect. That we believe, according to the Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that the actions are reflections of what is in the heart. And that they influence each other. Meaning, if I have a healthy heart, my actions will show it. And then if I do not have a healthy heart, my actions can help it. So, first step in getting a healthy heart is to actually better our actions, better our deeds. Have deeds that will actually support our heart 100%. Have times when we are doing deeds solely for the sake of Allah and not because the eyes of the people are upon us, not because I want to be known for a certain deed, but because I am doing this purely for the sake of Allah and not for anyone else. And along these lines, many of the scholars will say that you have to have moments in the day or night when you are alone. And you are worshiping Allah Azza wa Jal alone without anybody seeing you. Whatever that act of worship is, whether you want to read Qur'an, whether you want to call upon Allah, because all of us have needs, I know this for a fact, all of us have needs that we need Allah Azza wa Jal to help us with, whatever they are. We have to have these moments when we are with Allah Azza wa Jal alone. So many of us, and I am guilty of this as well, we go to be alone when we want to disobey Allah. When we want to disobey Allah, that's when we go alone because we don't want the people to see us in what we are doing. May Allah protect us. However, he's saying, and many of the scholars have said this, why don't we go alone when we want to actually worship Allah better? Why can't we have these moments that we worship Allah Azza wa Jal without anyone seeing us? This is why many of the tabi'een, they said one of them, he had a shop, and when he was waiting for customers to come in, he would be reading Qur'an. And that whenever one of his customers came in, he would cover the mushaf with the paper of his accounts, his accounting paper. And this is back in the day, I'm talking in the early ages of Islam. And so his friend noticed this habit of his. And he noticed, he didn't see him do it, but he noticed that under his books of accounting is the mushaf. He says, why are you doing this? He says, I will tell you, but I swear upon Allah, and I ask you to swear that you don't tell anyone, as long as I am alive. And he says, yes. He says, I don't want people to think that I am reading Qur'an every time they see me, because this will destroy my intention. This will destroy my sincerity for the sake of Allah. And therefore, if I see anybody, I cover it. So that way they think I'm busy with my business. But in fact, he says, I already know these numbers. These numbers aren't even that important to me. What's important to him, this person, was his recitation of Qur'an. There is another man who, when he went to his business, they found out that he fasted day and night. I'm sorry, not day and night, but every day of the year except for the days when it is prohibited to fast, without his wife or his children or even his close friends knowing that he was fasting. Because he would go out in the morning, his wife would give him food for his lunch. Yet he would go out, he would give that food to a poor person, go to his work, be fasting all day long, and then he would go home at Maghrib time and eat his iftar. But his wife would be thinking that this is his dinner that he is eating. And they asked him, why didn't you even tell your wife? He says, I feared that even if my wife knew, it would hurt my sincerity. Because he says, I'm not doing it for my wife. I'm not doing it for my children. I'm doing it for Allah alone. One of the tabi'een, he says, we had brothers of ours, they would be weeping in salah without the person next to them knowing that they are actually weeping. Their tears would be flowing and they would pretend to have a cold. Or they would pretend to have something else going on, when in fact they were weeping out of the khushu', out of the focus and out of the love and the fear of Allah Azza wa Jalla that they would have. And they said, we met our brothers and some of them would be weeping in the same bed. He is actually using the same pillar as his wife, and his wife has no idea what's going on with this individual. Because of his connection that he has with Allah, that he doesn't want anybody to know. And there would be a person who would be another one of the tabi'een. They found out that he would be praying his tahajjud at night, but he would pray it silently in order for the neighbors to not hear him. And they said, you can pray them out loud. He says, I don't want anybody to know that I'm praying. Not even my own wife. And they said that whenever his wife would wake up, they found out, he would actually break his prayer. He would completely finish it and pretend that he's doing something else, in order for his sincerity to be to that degree. These are some of the things that we, inshallah ta'ala, can try to emulate, not fully, but even have an idea of what these people did. So of course, the second thing is to have this time alone, in order for the person to worship Allah Azza wa Jal better. The third thing is to have an understanding of the watchfulness of Allah Azza wa Jal. That when we implement this, this will allow us to have such a healthier heart. That we know that Allah Azza wa Jal, when He says, يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا تُبْدُونَ وَمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ. And He knows, Allah Azza wa Jal knows what is in the heavens and what is in the earth, and He knows that which you expose and that which you conceal. And Allah Azza wa Jal says in another verse, وَهُوَ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. He knows what is inside of the hearts. Meaning, and this is directly from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَى أَجْسَادِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. That indeed Allah does not look at the way that you look, meaning at your clothes or your outside appearance and at your body. He does not look at this. But rather what Allah looks at is your heart and your deeds. Your heart and your deeds. So if we understand that Allah is looking at my heart, then I need to make sure that my heart is pure. I carry no ill feelings towards any Muslim. I carry no envy, no arrogance, none of these evil things that can eat away at a person's heart. And then I understand that if He's looking at my deeds, I should make sure that my deeds are done sincerely for Him and not for anyone else, and that my deeds are done in the way that He showed His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah Azza wa Jal help us and guide us to this and grant us healthy hearts. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الخلق وأشرف المرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. When Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu was asked to describe Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, the great companion, Khalifatu Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who has, subhanallah, this word, Khalifatu Rasulullah, is for no one other than Abu Bakr. And even when Umar radiallahu anhu took over, they started calling him Amir al-Mu'mineen, which is also a very honorable title. However, he was not called Khalifatu Rasulullah after this, as a purely indication of who he is. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, when he was asked about him, he used to say, Allahumma ilmi bihi anna sariratahu khayrun min alaniyatih wa annahu laysa fina mithluh. He says, Allahumma, and he's making a testimony to Allah that, oh Allah, we know, our assumption is that his secret life is better than his public life. This brings up an important point. If your life in secret is better than your life in public, then you are okay. Meaning, if the deeds that you do that are good are more in private than they are in public, this is good. And the sins that you do in private are less than the sins that you do in public, that means you're okay. And if they are equal, they said that this is adl, this is just or justice. Meaning the person lives the same lifestyle whether he is in private or he's in public. And this is acceptable, this is okay. However, and of course, most of us, including myself, are in this last category where our lives in public are perhaps better than our lives in private. The public face that we have in front of the people is better than that private face that we show to Allah alone. And this is why, of course, like I said before, this is a reminder for myself first and for everyone second, in order for us to improve our private lives, the lives that we have, that relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And for us not to pretend to be in public as good Muslims, and when we are alone, we are very bad. And that we keep our best deeds, they're the ones that we do in public, and our worst deeds are the ones that we do in private. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to switch it. This is why Abu Bakr as-Siddiq himself, whenever somebody would mention something good about him, especially when he was the leader of the Muslims, he would make the following statement. It's a beautiful dua, and he would say, Allahumma anta a'lamu minni binafsi wa ana a'lamu binafsi minhum. He says, oh Allah, you know myself better than I do, and I know myself better than they do. Meaning he's saying that their praise is wrong. They don't know what they're praising. They don't know what they're saying. They don't know the true nature of that individual. And so he would say, Allahumma ja'alni khayran mimma yadhunnun. Oh Allah, make me better than what they assume of me. Waghfir li ma la ya'lamun. And forgive me that which they do not know. وَلَا تُؤَاخِذْنِي بِمَا يَقُولُونَ. And do not hold me accountable with what they say about me. When many of these people, subhanallah, you read their stories, you see what they did, you truly understand how important it was for them to have a healthy heart. Now it is not a simple formula. There are many things that go into this. Having haya from Allah Azza wa Jal, this sense of shame and the sense that Allah is ever watchful wherever I am, wherever I may be, is very difficult. This perhaps needs a whole khutbah by itself. The idea that Allah Azza wa Jal tells us always that this dunya is not worth it, because if a person remembers that this dunya is fading away, and that this dunya will end, and that when a person is buried in the grave, he will take with him nothing, then he will understand that what I need to work for is my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and build that up, not build anything else up. And then if I build this up, Allah Azza wa Jal will grant me everything else as well. It will come with it, wallah. He will take care of the individual, without a doubt. And that each one of these needs perhaps a topic by itself. But this idea of us fixing what is inside of ourselves, this takes a lot of work. It will not happen overnight. It will happen over us doing these good deeds over and over. And a person comes to the Shaykh and he says, Ya Shaykh, I don't enjoy listening to Qur'an. Why is this? I don't enjoy reading the Qur'an. I can barely sit down and read for about 5 minutes and then I'm bored. I don't really connect with it. He says, don't worry. Continue. Don't give up. You're giving up easily. You're giving into shaitan. Do you think shaitan will go to a destroyed house? Shaitan, when he tries to whisper to somebody, is he going to whisper to us a person who's already led astray? He has no business with that person. That person's already astray. In fact, shaitan is going to target specifically and most importantly places like this, the masjid, and everybody who goes to the masjid. This is shaitan's target. Why would he go to someone else who's already led astray? He doesn't care. They're already astray. He's going to go to the people who come to the masjid. He's going to go to that person who's reading Qur'an. So if the person reading Qur'an says, I feel bored, or I don't agree, or I don't fully understand, or I can't really focus, we say continue. Fight yourself, fight shaitan. Understand that it's a battle. Understand that shaitan is not going to let you go. That for every letter that you are reading, you are getting closer to Allah and farther from Him. Of course He doesn't want you to read. And if yourself, you have been used to years and years and years spending your time in something else, and you have never disciplined yourself with the Qur'an, or with anything else, with making dua, for example, or praying tahajjud, or praying to Allah Azza wa Jal on a regular basis, then of course you're going to find it difficult. This is why you start little by little, and you keep on increasing it until, wallahi, eventually you will crave the recitation of Qur'an more than you crave food and water. Wallahi, I can guarantee this. To any individual who has a relationship with the Book of Allah, or with their salah, or with their dua, that wallahi, they will crave it more than they crave food and water. In fact, they can go a very long time without food and water and not even realize, but if they go a period of time without remembering Allah, they will feel like they are empty inside. And that there's a hunger that they need to fill, and it can only be filled with remembering their Lord. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us amongst those who remember Him, and make us amongst those who recite the Qur'an night and day, and amongst those who their private life is better than their public. عباد الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين أعداءك أعداء الدين اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات المؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات يا قاضي الحاجات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات يا رب العالمين اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا اللهم اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون وأقم الصلاة